She didn't know the man she married was the same outlaw who burned her home. And when she found out, it was already too late. The wind howled through Dust Haven as a lone rider approached from the west. Dust clung to his coat, the color of long-forgotten earth. He rode like a man chasing ghosts or running from them. His name was Ethan Cole, though few called him that anymore. Most just called him the Black Coyote, the outlaw who vanished after the fire. He reined in his horse beneath a rusted town sign. "Welcome to Dust Haven." The words felt heavy, like a warning. He dismounted slowly, boots sinking into the dirt street. Every eye that looked his way seemed to whisper, "Trouble." He pulled the brim of his hat low. He wasn't here to start anything. Not this time. He told himself he'd stay one night, just long enough to bury the past in whiskey and silence. But fate had other plans. He saw her near the well, a woman lifting a wooden bucket, sunlight catching in her hair. Strong hands, steady movements, a face that could quiet storms. For a heartbeat, he couldn't breathe. He thought she'd died that night. The fire, the screams, the smell of smoke and gunpowder. But there she was, alive, and she didn't recognize him. He took off his hat, throat dry. "Evening, ma'am." She looked up, a soft smile breaking through the dust. "Evening, stranger." Her voice was the same. Kind, calm, the sound that had haunted his dreams for 7 long years. He turned away before she could see the guilt in his eyes. Every step he took felt like walking backward in time. That night, he rented a small room above the saloon. The floorboards creaked like they remembered the weight of his sins. He sat by the window, watching her close her store. She locked the door, looked up at the stars, and for a moment, smiled again. He wanted to walk down there, tell her the truth, beg for forgiveness. But some truths cut deeper than any bullet. He opened his saddlebag and pulled out an old wanted poster. His own face stared back. Ethan Cole, wanted dead or alive. $1,000 reward. The paper trembled in his hands. He threw it into the fire, watching his past curl and blacken. "She don't know," he muttered. "She never will." The flames crackled like laughter from the devil himself. Then a knock on the door. 3 soft raps that froze him where he sat. He reached for his revolver. "Who's there?" A voice on the other side. Gentle, familiar. "Mr. Cole, you dropped this outside my store earlier." He opened the door slowly, and there she was. Clara Hayes, the woman he thought he'd killed, standing in the flicker of lantern light, holding something small in her palm. A locket. His locket. The one that fell from his pocket the night of the fire. She smiled faintly. It looked important. He couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Her fingers brushed his as she handed it back, and for the first time in years, warmth spread through his chest, right where guilt had made its home. She turned to leave. "Good night, Mr. Cole." He stood frozen in the doorway, locket burning in his hand, watching her walk into the night, watching the past he tried to bury come back to life. He whispered to himself, "She don't know, not yet." But deep down, he knew. Dust Haven was about to remember. The fire was coming back. Morning broke over Dust Haven like a promise it couldn't keep. The air was sharp with the smell of coffee, horses, and dust. Ethan Cole walked down the main street, hat low, coat catching the breeze. He didn't belong here, but something in him didn't want to leave. The town was small, too small for secrets. He passed the blacksmith, the saloon, the church. Every step echoed like a memory he couldn't shake. At the trading post, Clara Hayes was arranging jars of preserves by the window. The same window that caught the first firelight years ago. He froze for a heartbeat, the ghosts whispering again. She looked up and caught his reflection in the glass. "You're up early, Mr. Cole." He smiled faintly. Old habit. Hard to sleep when the past won't stay quiet. She tilted her head, amused. "Then maybe you ought to stop running from it." The words hit deeper than she knew. He cleared his throat. "You got coffee?" She poured him a cup, her hands steady but her eyes searching. "You from around here?" she asked. He hesitated. "Used to be. Long time ago." "Thought so." She smiled gently. "You ride like someone who knows these roads." He wanted to tell her everything, that he once rode through this same town as a monster, that her home burned because of him. But his voice stayed trapped in his chest. "Guess I do," he said instead. She set the cup in front of him. Steam curled between them like unspoken words. "You planning to stay a while?" she asked. "Maybe," he said. "Depends who's a skin." Clara chuckled softly. Just a shopkeeper mackin' conversation. For the first time in years, he smiled without forcing it. Outside, a stagecoach thundered by, sending a gust of dust through the door. Two men stepped off the back, both wearing long coats, one carrying a badge. Ethan's smile faded. The law had arrived in Dust Haven. He turned slightly, keeping his face in shadow. Clara noticed the tension in his shoulders. Something wrong? He forced a breath. "Just don't like company." The taller of the two men entered the store. Sheriff Abel Grant, a man with eyes like iron and a memory sharper than his gun. He scanned the room slowly, his gaze landing on Ethan. "Well, I'll be damned," the sheriff said, stepping closer. "Didn't expect to see a drifter like you this early." Ethan nodded politely, "Just passing through." "That's so." The sheriff's tone was light, but his hand rested near his holster. "Name's Grant. You?" Ethan hesitated, then said quietly, "Cole. Ethan Cole." Clara looked between them. The name didn't mean anything to her, but the sheriff's expression changed. Subtle, but enough. He'd heard that name before. "Well, Mr. Cole," the sheriff said slowly, "enjoy your stay. Just don't stir up any dust." When he left, the tension in the room stayed behind. Clara exhaled. Sheriff's not usually that nosy. Ethan forced a smile. Maybe he just don't like strangers. He left the store soon after, but his mind wouldn't rest. The sheriff's face, Clara's smile, the fire, it all tangled like barbed wire inside him. By sundown, he found himself back near the well, watching her close up shop again. She saw him and smiled softly. "You always stand there when the sun goes down." "Maybe I like the view," he said. "Or maybe," she teased, "you just don't want to be alone." He didn't answer. She walked toward him, dust curling around her boots. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally she said, "You remind me of someone I once knew, someone I lost." His heart stopped. "Lost?" She nodded. In the fire. Years ago, he tried to save my family. Never came back. He swallowed hard, guilt twisting deep inside him. I'm sorry, he said. She smiled sadly. Don't be. I like to believe he found peace somewhere. He looked away, voice breaking. Maybe he did. The church bell rang in the distance. She glanced toward it, then back at him. You should come by the ranch tomorrow. Could use a hand fixing the fence. He hesitated. You sure about that? I wouldn't ask if I wasn't, she said. You look like a man who needs something to hold onto. She turned and walked away, her shadow stretching long behind her. He stood frozen, the locket heavy in his pocket. The woman he destroyed was asking him to rebuild something beside her. He looked toward the saloon where the sheriff was watching from the porch. Their eyes met for a split second, a silent warning in the fading light. Ethan knew what it meant. His time in Dust Haven was running out. But leaving wasn't an option anymore. He'd just been given a second chance by the very woman he'd wronged. That night, the sheriff unrolled an old wanted poster beneath the lamp's glow. Ethan Cole's face stared back at him from the paper. Abel Grant whispered, "Looks like the black coyotes come home." The morning came quiet to quiet. Ethan Cole woke before sunrise, the light creeping through the slats of the window. He'd barely slept. Guilt kept him awake, whispering like an old friend that never left. The town was still, only the sound of horses shifting and the church bell creaking in the breeze. He watched from his window as Clara crossed the street, leading her moray toward the edge of town. She was heading home, to the same land he once burned. He couldn't stay away. Not anymore. By mid-morning, he found himself walking behind her wagon, boots crunching the dry earth. The air carried the scent of sage and smoke, faint, but enough to stir old memories. Clara glanced back, smiling when she saw him. "Didn't think you'd take me up on that fence work?" He shrugged slightly. "Seemed like you could use a hand. Or maybe you just like following people without saying much," she teased. He smiled faintly. "Maybe both." The road wound past dead trees and open plains until they reached what was left of her ranch. The fences were worn, the barn half collapsed, but the house, rebuilt from ashes, stood proud against the horizon. "Lost everything here," she said quietly, her voice trembling just a little. "Wasn't the fire that broke me. It was not knowing why." He swallowed hard. "You ever find out who did it?" She shook her head. "The law said it was bandits. Outlaws chasing gold, but gold ain't worth that much hate." Her eyes found his for a moment, soft, searching. "You ever lose something you couldn't forgive yourself for?" He looked away. "Every day." They worked side by side until the sun climbed high. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of things neither could say. Each hammer strike on the fence felt like confession. At noon, she brought out bread and coffee. They sat on the porch steps, the wind playing with her hair. She smiled faintly. "You don't talk much, do you, Mr. Cole?" "Words don't fix much," he said. "Actions do." She studied him quietly. "I think you've seen too much pain to believe in words anymore." He looked at her, really looked. "Maybe I've just been waiting for someone who makes them mean something again." Her breath caught, just slightly. But before either could speak again, the sound of hooves broke the stillness. Two riders appeared on the ridge, dust trailing behind. The sheriff and his deputy. Clara stood, confused. What's he doing out here? Ethan's hand drifted toward his coat, where his revolver rested. He stayed quiet. The sheriff dismounted, nodding politely. "Mornin', Miss Hayes. Heard you could use a little help mending things." She smiled. "That's kind of you, Sheriff, but we're just fine." Grant's eyes slid to Ethan. "That's so?" Ethan met his gaze. Calm, controlled, but his jaw tightened. The sheriff tipped his hat, just making sure no trouble comes through town. "Lot of strangers ridding these trails." Ethan spoke evenly. "Ain't stayin' long, I'm sure," the sheriff said with a smirk. "Dust Haven don't forget faces. Cole, especially the kind wanted in 3 territories." Clara froze. "What did you just say?" Ethan didn't move, didn't breathe. Grant pulled the worn wanted poster from his pocket. The wind caught it, fluttering between them like a ghost. Her eyes fell on the image. His face, younger but unmistakable. "Ethan Cole. Arson. Murder." Her voice cracked. "This isn't you, is it?" He tried to speak, but the words burned in his throat. The sheriff holstered the poster. "Best watch yourself, ma'am. Men like him don't change." He mounted his horse and rode off, dust clouding the space between them. The silence left behind felt heavier than gunfire. Clara turned toward him, her eyes filled with disbelief. "Tell me he's lying, Ethan." He couldn't. The truth showed in the way his hands trembled. "Clara," he started. "It ain't what it looks like." She stepped back. "You burned my home?" He closed his eyes, pain flickering across his face. "It was an accident, a job gone wrong. I didn't know you were there. I tried to stop it." "You killed my family," she whispered. He shook his head, voice breaking. "No, I tried to save them. I swear it." Tears welled in her eyes, but anger hardened them. "You should have stayed gone." She turned and walked toward the house, slamming the door behind her. The sound echoed across the empty ranch like a gunshot. Ethan stood there, motionless, staring at the dust swirling around his boots. Every step he took toward redemption just dragged him back into the fire. He looked toward the horizon, the sheriff's shape disappearing into the hills, and whispered to himself, "Guess some ghosts don't stay buried." He mounted his horse and rode off, the setting sun painting his shadow long across the earth. Mini cliffhanger end of part 3. That night, as Clara sat by the window crying, she opened the locket she'd returned to him earlier. Inside, a tiny photograph, her own face, younger, smiling beside her father. Burned edges around it, and beneath it, a faint line of soot. Her hands trembled as she whispered, "Dear God, he kept it all these years." The night wind howled across Dust Haven, carrying with it whispers of old sins. Ethan sat alone by a dying campfire just outside town, staring into the flames as if they could burn the guilt out of him. The locket lay open in his palm, Clara's picture glowing faintly in the firelight. He closed it slowly, like a prayer he wasn't sure heaven would hear. His horse shifted behind him, restless, sensing what he couldn't yet say out loud, that the law wasn't done with him. Hoofbeats echoed through the canyon. He didn't look up. He already knew who it was. Sheriff Grant rode in slow, his lantern swinging from the saddle. "Didn't expect you to run," he said. "Men like you always do, though." Ethan didn't move. "Ain't running." "That right." Grant dismounted, boots crunching the gravel. "Then maybe you're waiting for me to bring the irons." Ethan's voice was low. "You already took everything I had. Don't see what's left to chain." Grant stared at him for a long moment, then tossed a small pouch into the dirt. Inside, a silver badge, dented and scorched. "Found that near the Hayes Ranch after the fire," the sheriff said. "Belonged to her father. Guessing you already knew that." Ethan's throat tightened. He tried to help. "I told him to get out before the fire spread, but he didn't." Ethan's jaw flexed. He was trying to save his daughter. The sheriff's voice hardened. "And you were working for the men that lit that torch. Tell me, Cole, how's a man like you come back to the very place he destroyed?" Ethan stood slowly, eyes dark but steady. "To finish what I started, to make it right." Grant snorted. "Make it right. Redemption don't come with a hammer and nails. The only justice you'll find here is the kind that swings from a rope." Ethan's hand twitched toward his holster, then stopped. He wasn't that man anymore. At least, he wanted to believe he wasn't. "You think I came here to die?" Ethan asked quietly. The sheriff shook his head. "No, you came here hoping she'd forgive you. But forgiveness don't change the past." Ethan looked out toward the horizon, the faint glow of Clara's ranch visible in the distance. "No, but maybe it can change what comes next." Grant turned to mount his horse. "She deserves to know the whole truth." "You don't tell her." "I will." Ethan's voice broke the silence. "What truth you think she don't already know?" Grant looked back, eyes cold. "That you weren't just part of that fire, Cole. You led it." The sheriff rode off, his lantern fading into the darkness, leaving Ethan standing there, frozen. The truth hit harder than any bullet, because deep down, he knew Grant was right. He'd lit the torch that night. He'd buried her past beneath smoke and ashes. And now, to earn forgiveness, he'd have to face the one person he'd hurt most, and the ghost still hunting him. As dawn crept over the plains, Ethan mounted his horse and rode toward the ranch, knowing the next sunrise could be his last. At the same time, Clara opened her window, sleepless, the wind carrying faint voices from the canyon, men's voices. One of them she recognized, the outlaw leader from years ago. Her hand froze on the windowsill. If he was back, Ethan wasn't the only ghost riding into town. The morning came slow and heavy, painted in gold and dust. Clara stepped out of her house with a rifle slung over her shoulder, eyes scanning the horizon. She hadn't slept, not since the voices in the canyon. Her ranch hands were gone for supplies. The land was quiet to quiet. Then she saw it, a faint column of smoke rising near the creek bed. The same place her father used to take her fishing before everything burned. Her chest tightened. No one had camped there in years. She saddled her horse and rode out, the wind pulling her hair loose as the sky darkened with a coming storm. By the time she reached the creek, the fire was out, but there were footprints, fresh, large, and a brand mark pressed into the mud a rattlesnake with wings. Her blood ran cold. That was the mark of the Raven Riders, the same outlaw gang that burned her home. The same men Ethan had once ridden with. Behind her, a voice came low and broken. "Clara, put the rifle down." She turned fast, gun aimed. Ethan stood 10 paces away, hat in hand, mud on his boots, eyes filled with something between shame and sorrow. "What are you doing out here?" she demanded. "You following me now?" He shook his head. "I came to warn you." Her finger twitched on the trigger. "Warn me about what?" "They're back," he said quietly. "The men who burned this place, the ones He stopped, the words choking him. "The ones you what?" Clara snapped. "Say it." His voice dropped. "The ones I rode with." The silence hit harder than any thunderclap. Clara's breath shook. "You think telling me that's gonna make me forgive you?" "No," Ethan said. "I'm not a skin for that. I just need you to pack up and leave before nightfall. They ain't coming for gold this time. They're coming for me." She lowered the rifle slowly, eyes burning with disbelief. "So they'll burn my home again, because of you." Ethan stepped closer. "If I leave, they'll find you anyway. They think you know where the sheriff's hiding their bounty money. They'll kill anyone to get it." Clara's voice trembled with anger. "You brought hell to my door once, Ethan Cole. Don't you dare do it again. I'm trying to stop it this time." "You can't stop what you started," she said. "You're just another ghost ridden through ashes." He took one more step toward her, his voice barely a whisper. "Maybe. But if ghosts can bleed, maybe they can make things right too." A rifle cracked in the distance. The bullet hit the dirt between them. Clara froze. Ethan drew his gun instantly, eyes scanning the ridge. 3 riders appeared against the sun, dark silhouettes with dust trailing behind them. The Raven Riders. Clara's heart pounded. "You led them here?" "No," Ethan said, loading his revolver. "They followed me." He handed her his spare gun. "If you stay, you fight. If you run, you die." The wind howled through the canyon. The riders began their descent. Clara hesitated, then cocked the revolver. "Guess I ain't running then." Ethan looked at her, a flicker of pride and sorrow in his eyes. "Didn't think you would." The first shots rang out. Bullets tore through the air, splintering wood and dirt. Clara fired back, steady and fierce. Ethan moved beside her, firing quick, precise. For a moment, the world was nothing but smoke, thunder, and the ghosts of what they both lost. Then the shooting stopped. Silence. Ethan looked to the ridge, to horses gone. One rider still standing. He knew that shape, that scarred jaw, that black hat. "Reed," he whispered. The man who once led him into the fire now stood against him. And this time, only one of them would ride away alive. Reed raised his hand, signaling something behind him. A 4th rider stepped into view, a woman, and Clara gasped. It was her mother's old friend, long thought dead, now wearing the mark of the Raven Riders. The smoke cleared, drifting through the broken light of the storm. Ethan reloaded slowly, eyes fixed on the ridge. Clara stood silent beside him, her breathing sharp, her hands trembling from the gunfire. The last 2 riders were gone. Only Reed remained, and the woman beside him. The sight made Clara's stomach twist. The woman pulled down her bandana. Her face was older, worn by years of dust and sorrow, but unmistakable. "Mary," Clara whispered. "Mary Finch?" The woman smiled faintly. "Didn't think I'd see you again. Clara Hayes." Clara's throat tightened. "You were my mother's friend." You disappeared after the fire." Mary's eyes darkened. "I didn't disappear. I joined the ones who survived." Ethan's voice was low. "You joined him." Mary turned toward Ethan, her expression sharp. "You got no right to judge. Cole, you rode with us long before I did." Reed's voice cut through the wind. "Seems the past don't stay buried, does it?" He pointed his gun toward Ethan. "You left me to burn that night." Ethan didn't move. "You lit the fire, Reed. I just didn't stop you." Reed grinned, yellow teeth flashing under his hat. "And that's what makes you worse. A man who stands by and watches hell take everything just to save himself." Clara's heart pounded. She turned toward Ethan. "What does he mean? You watched my father my home?" Ethan met her gaze, the truth weighing heavy in his voice. "I thought if I did what they asked, they'd let you go. I didn't know they'd kill him too." Clara's face broke. "You did nothing." Ethan took a step closer, voice cracking. "I've been paying for it every day since." Reed laughed. "Not enough." He nodded to Mary. "End it." Mary hesitated, her gun trembling. "She ain't part of this." Reed barked. "She's part of him." Lightning flashed across the canyon. Clara's hand went to her revolver. Ethan stepped in front of her. Mary's gun wavered. For a long moment, no one breathed. Then she lowered it. "I've done enough killing," she said. Reed's rage exploded. He swung his revolver toward her. But before he could fire, Ethan did. The shot echoed through the canyon like thunder. Reed fell backward, dust rising around him. Mary stared at the body, eyes wide. "You should have let him hang," she whispered. Ethan looked down at Reed's lifeless face, jaw tight. He was already hanging, just didn't know it yet. Clara turned away, tears mixing with the rain. "You think killing him makes it right?" "No," Ethan said quietly, "but it might stop another fire." Mary dropped to her knees beside Reed. "You can't bury the past, Ethan. You can only make peace with it." Ethan's eyes flicked to Clara. "I'm trying to." But Clara didn't answer. She mounted her horse and rode away, her figure fading into the storm. Ethan watched her disappear into the rain, his heart breaking all over again. He holstered his gun, soaked to the bone, and whispered to no one, "You can't run from ashes." Mary stood, voice trembling. "She needs time. Maybe forgiveness too. But you need to find your soul again." Ethan looked toward the town lights glowing faintly through the storm. "Then I reckon that's where I'll start." As he rode away, the wind carried Reed's last words in his mind. The past don't stay buried. And for the first time, Ethan feared the outlaw in him wasn't done yet. That night, Clara reached home and found a letter nailed to her door. A single word scrawled in ash across the paper. "Run." The storm passed before dawn, leaving Dust Haven soaked in silence. Clara stood on her porch, staring at the letter still nailed to her door. One word, written in soot, smeared by the rain: "Run." Her hands shook as she tore it down. The smell of smoke clung to the paper. She didn't know who left it, Ethan or someone worse. Behind her, the wind groaned through the empty ranch, rattling the barn doors. The land that once sang with cattle and laughter now felt hollow, haunted. She walked inside, boots echoing against the wooden floor. Every corner reminded her of loss. Her father's chair, the charred picture frame that somehow survived the fire, the burned edges of her past she kept hidden in plain sight. A whisper left her lips. How many times can one life burn? Outside, a horse approached. She tensed, hand drifting toward her rifle. Ethan called out softly, "It's me." She didn't answer. He dismounted and stepped up to the porch, dripping from the rain. "You got my message." Her eyes narrowed. "That was you?" He nodded. "They ain't all gone, Clara. Reed had more men. I saw tracks heading east, toward the ridge. They'll come for you next. Try to finish what he started." Clara folded her arms, voice shaking with anger. "Why? What's left to take?" Ethan's eyes dropped. "Not what? Who?" She stared at him. "You?" "Yeah," he said quietly. "They think killing me will settle the score. I won't let that bring fire to your door again." Clara's breath hitched. "And what? You plan to just ride off and let em kill you?" He gave a half smile. "I've been running my whole life. Maybe it's time I stop." Her voice broke. "That's not redemption, Ethan. That's suicide." He took a slow step forward. "Maybe redemption's just another word for dying the right way." She turned away, tears in her eyes. "Don't talk like that." He reached out, stopping just short of touching her. "Clara, when I lit that fire years ago, I didn't know it'd take your father, your home, everything. But every time I close my eyes, I see it burning again. I can't undo it, but I can make sure it ends with me." The silence between them was heavier than the thunder that came before. Then she whispered, "If you go, you'll never come back." Ethan's voice trembled. "Wasn't sure I ever truly did." She turned to face him finally, eyes red, jaw trembling. "I buried my heart once, Ethan Cole. Don't make me do it twice." The pain in his eyes said everything he couldn't. He pulled the locket from his coat pocket, the one he'd kept all these years. "I kept this," he said softly. "Your picture, the only thing that survived the fire. Figured one day I'd hand it back to the woman I owed everything to." Clara stared at it, the silver scorched at the edges. The glass cracked. She reached for it, then stopped. Her voice barely carried. "You can't fix ashes." He closed his hand around it. "Maybe not. But maybe you can plant something new in M." They stood there, two souls tied together by smoke and regret. Then distant gunfire broke the moment, sharp and echoing from the east ridge. Ethan's face hardened. "They found us." Clara grabbed her rifle. "Then they'll wish they hadn't." He almost smiled. "That's the Clara I remember." Another shot rang out, closer this time. Horses screamed in the dark. Ethan stepped off the porch, reloading his revolver. "Stay behind me." Clara's voice steadied. "Not this time." From the ridge, 3 torches appeared, weaving through the fog like serpents. And as they neared, Clara realized one of the riders was wearing a sheriff's coat. Her heart froze. Someone from town was helping them. Gunfire split the dawn. The echo rolled across the plains like thunder chasing ghosts. Ethan ducked behind a water trough, bullets sparking off the iron rim. Clara crouched beside him, breath sharp, eyes fierce. They're flanking left, she shouted. Ethan peeked out. 3 riders cutting through the fog, torches in one hand, rifles in the other. The man leading them wore a sheriff's coat. His blood ran cold. That can't be. Clara frowned. What is it? Ethan's voice cracked. That's Sheriff Darnell. Clara blinked in disbelief. Darnell? He's been protecting this town for years. Not from me, Ethan muttered. He used to run with my gang before the badge. Guess some debts don't stay buried. Another shot tore through the porch beam, showering splinters around them. Ethan gritted his teeth. He's selling you out, Clara. They're not here for justice. They're here for the gold Reed buried. Clara turned sharply. What gold? Ethan hesitated, heart pounding. Before I left the gang, we robbed a military payroll. Reed buried the loot under your father's land. I tried to warn him before the fire, but Reed got there first. The world seemed to stop. Clara's voice turned to ice. So that's why my home burned. Ethan nodded slowly. Reed thought your father was hiding it. I didn't know he'd be there that night. Clara, I swear. Her eyes glistened with tears and rage. You lied to me. You said you didn't know why it happened. I didn't at first. Not till later. She looked away, shaking her head. All this time, you carried that truth like a loaded gun. Because I knew if I told you, you'd never forgive me. The pounding of hooves grew louder. The sheriff's voice bellowed through the fog. Ethan Cole, step out now, and we'll spare the woman. Ethan raised his revolver, jaw set. He's lying. Clara's hand trembled as she loaded her rifle. Then we make our stand. He looked at her, searching her eyes. You don't have to stay. She met his gaze coldly. And leave you to burn my life twice? A bullet struck the doorframe, snapping the air between them. Ethan fired back, dropping one of the riders. Another fell from his horse. But the sheriff kept coming, torch in hand, shouting, You can't run from the past. Cole. Ethan fired again, missing by inches. Ain't running anymore. Clara ducked behind a barrel, whispering, There's too many. Smoke began rising. The torches had caught the barn roof. Flames licked the sky, echoing the fire that had started it all years ago. Ethan looked at it, haunted. It's happening again. Clara grabbed his arm, fierce and trembling. Then stop it this time. He looked at her, her hair wild, eyes blazing with fury and heartbreak, and nodded, together. As they stood, side by side in the firelight, Ethan reloaded his last bullet. Then he muttered, No more running, no more lies. Clara whispered, Then end it. The sheriff's shadow appeared through the smoke, revolver raised, torch glowing in his other hand. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Darnell. The sheriff smirked, still trying to play the hero. Not hero, Ethan said. Just a man with nothing left to lose. The sheriff fired. Ethan dove, rolling across the mud. The bullet grazed his arm. Clara took aim, squeezed the trigger. Her shot shattered the torch in Darnell's hand. Fire burst around them as the torch hit the spilled kerosene. Everything went white and roaring. Ethan shielded Clara as the explosion threw them both into the dirt. When the smoke cleared, the sheriff stood limping, his coat burning, gun trembling in his hand. He looked at Ethan, hatred and pain twisting his face. "You should have stayed dead." Ethan, bleeding and covered in ash, rose to his feet. "Yeah," he said quietly, "I should have." The sheriff cocked his gun, but Ethan was faster. One shot, then silence. The sheriff collapsed, his badge glinting in the firelight. Clara looked at Ethan, his hands shaking, eyes hollow. He holstered the gun and whispered, "Every sin finds its way home." The barn burned behind them, lighting the sky like the past refusing to die. As the flames raged, Clara spotted something gleaming half buried in the mud, a rusted lockbox, scorched but intact. Her heart stopped. The gold, the secret that cost her everything. The fire had quieted to embers, but the smell of smoke still clung to the morning air. Ethan sat on the ground, bleeding from his arm, staring at the sheriff's lifeless body. Clara stood a few steps away, her eyes fixed on the half-buried lockbox glinting in the mud. Neither of them spoke. The silence was heavier than gunfire. She knelt slowly, her trembling fingers brushing off the dirt. The metal was scorched, the latch half melted, but it still held shut. Ethan watched her, jaw tight. "You don't wanna open that, Clara." Her voice was steady but cold. "You burned my home. I deserve to know why." He looked away, unable to meet her eyes. "It won't give you peace. Then it'll give me truth." She struck the lock with the butt of her rifle until it cracked open. Inside was a pile of gold bars, dull and darkened by fire, and something else. A small locket, half melted. Clara picked it up, her breath catching. She opened it. Inside was a tiny picture, her father, smiling. And beside him, a young man she didn't recognize until she did. "Ethan," her hands shook. You knew my father?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah. I rode with him before the war. We weren't outlaws then, just men trying to survive bad times." Tears welled in her eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" He swallowed hard. "Because I didn't deserve to say his name. I owed him my life, and I failed him." The wind carried the crackle of burning wood. Ethan stared at the ground, his voice low. "Reed came after the gold. I tried to stop him. Your father fought back, and Reed. He lit the fire to cover it all. I was too late." Clara's voice broke. "You left him there." "I dragged him out of the flames," Ethan said. "He was alive, for a moment. He gave me that locket and said, 'Take care of my girl.' Then he died right there in my arms." Clara fell to her knees, clutching the locket to her chest. The pain in her face cut deeper than any bullet. Ethan's eyes glistened with tears. "I wanted to tell you, but I was already the outlaw who burned your world. What good would the truth have done then?" She looked at him, torn between hate and heartbreak. "You think I can forgive that?" He didn't answer, just stood there, exhausted, hollow. "No, I think you shouldn't." A faint rumble of thunder rolled over the plains. Rain began to fall, hissing against the dying fire. Clara stared at the gold, her voice trembling. All this death for a pile of metal. Ethan nodded. It cursed everyone who touched it. She kicked the box shut, then let it burn too. She dragged the box toward the fire pit, but Ethan stopped her. No, Clara. That gold was meant to build your father's dream. A new ranch, a home for you. That's why he hid it. Her voice was sharp. And what about you? What were you hiding for? He looked at her, rain running down his face like tears. I wasn't hiding anymore. I came back to give it to you. She froze, realizing what he meant. You came back to die, didn't you? He gave a faint, broken smile. Maybe, or maybe to see if forgiveness was real. She turned away, unable to look at him. You don't get to decide that. He nodded slowly. I know. The rain grew heavier. The fire hissed and died. The gold gleamed faintly beneath the ashes, untouched but tainted. Clara walked to her father's old grave, still marked by a rough wooden cross near the fence. She placed the locket there, whispering, "Rest now, Pa." Ethan stood behind her, his hat in his hand, eyes full of regret. Finally, she spoke without turning. You saved me tonight. But that don't erase what came before. I'm not asking you to forget, he said softly. Just to remember who I tried to be at the end. The rain washed the blood from his hands. Clara closed her eyes, whispering through the storm, you should leave before the law comes. He nodded, stepping back. You'll be safe now. She finally turned to look at him. One last time. And you? He smiled faintly. Doesn't matter. He turned toward his horse, limping, bleeding, fading into the fog. Clara watched him go until he disappeared into the gray. Then she looked down at the grave and whispered, he came back, Pa. He came back. As the rain poured harder, Clara noticed something buried beneath the grave marker, the edge of another box, smaller, older. She knelt down, brushing away the mud, and saw her father's handwriting carved into the lid. For Ethan. The storm passed with the dawn. By sunrise, the fire was out, the smoke gone, and the land lay quiet, broken, but peaceful. Clara stood where the grave met the wet earth. Her dress was soaked and torn, her eyes tired but steady. Beside her lay the smaller box she had found, her father's message to the man who ruined and saved her life. She hesitated for a long moment before opening it. The hinges creaked like old bones. Inside lay a folded letter, edges burned, sealed with wax that had half melted in the years underground. Her hands trembled as she broke it open. The ink was faded, but the words were still legible. Ethan, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And if you're still breathing, it means you run from your ghosts instead of burying them. You were like a son to me once. I never blamed you for what the world turned you into. Just promise me one thing. When the time comes, protect Clara. Don't let her heart turn to ash like ours did. Clara's eyes filled with tears. She could barely breathe as she turned the paper over and saw another line, written in a different hand. It was Ethan's handwriting. I tried, old friend. God knows I tried. I couldn't save you, but I'll die trying to save her. She covered her mouth, trembling. The words blurred through her tears. The wind stirred the grass gently, carrying the faint scent of smoke and rain. Clara folded the letter carefully, then placed it inside the locket she'd found before. She fastened it around her neck, whispering, "You kept your word, Ethan, even when it broke you." She turned toward the horizon, and for a moment, through the morning mist, she thought she saw a figure on horseback, far away, watching her. The coat, the hat, the slow way he turned his horse toward the rising sun. But when she blinked, he was gone. Only dust and light remained. She smiled faintly, tears falling again, not from pain this time, but from peace. Walking to the half-burned fence, she began to gather the broken planks, her movements slow but steady, her voice soft and trembling. "You wanted to build something, Pa. Maybe I still can." She looked once more at the grave, at the faint smoke curling into the sky. "And maybe he can finally rest too."